Hey Andrew.
Uh,
All
Back
right,
again.
welcome to our episode two of our podcast on the old student versus the new student for the new post-secondary student topic. This week, we're going to talk about student services. And I know typically, and in doing some research and whatnot, and also sort of living through it myself, typically when you think of a student who needs student services, immediately we go to academics. So, what kind of services does this person need? What did they get when they were in high school? Do they have an IEP? Do they have a 504? Do they need extra time? There's all different realms of student services that typically focus on academics and what can students do. And I even remember when we first started with you, and I know you're going to talk about that a little bit. We there were some things that you needed when you first started college that you had available to you in high school, though I don't believe you used them. But they were available to you in college, and we wanted to make sure that they were going to be available to you in high school. Excuse me, they were available in high school. We wanted them to be available in college. But there's a lot of other student services needs outside of academics that today's student needs. There are different kinds of students. There are students that are coming in that are low income and they may be first generation low income students who are looking to get an education just like everybody else, but need some sort of additional services. And that can be from grants and loans, that can be from a little extra help in being able to organize. They can be commuting and need to be able to um, organize their time with school and working because there's different things that involve, are outside of school that they need. And there are other students that have additional challenges, whether they are physically unable to walk to class, whether they need specific kind of seating in class. There's different things that people need. So before we go into your story, and I know you have one, can you speak to a little bit about what you've seen from the student services realm at your university?
It's actually great that you mentioned all that because that brings a lot to the table. My direct roommate this year actually fits the mold of most of what you just said. Commutes to a whole nother state every week. He works full time to pay for college as a first generation student, immigrant student, actually. Low income, checks every box like that. Only got the scholarship from that everyone gets from the college. Not sure if he applied to anything else, but that's all he has, and he's actively working to pay off this semester, and we'll be doing the same for next semester. And firsthand, I know I did very similar last year when I would work and go back to school, and then come home and work and go back to school. And I know it's very exhausting, but I didn't work full time. I worked a part-time job that I worked in high school. He works a full-time lab tech job, and then comes back to do a full-time school job. It's very different, but also very similar. And there's no support for that. They don't really care. It's not that they don't care. There's no support for it. It's not offered. There's no program in place, or there's nothing really available for a student in that kind of situation. Um, if I were to give any suggestions for a program, I would say maybe slowing down the workload, or being more uh generous isn't the right word. I would say willing to work with the student on like a timeline for getting work in, because he is very dedicated to his work. If I asked him a single thing about his major, I don't even understand what he's saying. He knows it all. But it's not a lack of caring, it's a lack of time. He has to drive 3.5 hours both ways, and on top of that, work full time to pay for school. Like, I can understand how you can get behind there. I got behind same thing last year, and I only drove 40 minutes. It's a lot to deal with. And that's not even the stress that you have to deal with. You have to worry about paying bills. You're sick one time, you can't pay the semester. You might get kicked out of school. You fail one class. You might not want to go back because you just paid for a class you failed. So there's definitely that to deal with. As far as like traveling low income first generation. But Yeah, I would say there's a gap where there needs to be filled for that kind of student. However, there definitely are support services that I could also say he has not reached out to because, but like I said, there's no time to because it takes extra time. You have to book a time that probably doesn't work with him because they're open on weekends. He's not here, or it's during class and he's only here during class. Like he will leave the second class is over. He's back to working. So that's very difficult for him, because classes, my schedule, I have 3 days of class, but those 3 days are full of class. Like those, they're booked for class. So if I can't find a time, if I'm gone every other day, I have no time. Um, and then they're closed, and you can't work with them. So there's definitely a gap there that it could be an easy fix. I mean, work with the teacher. It's all away from the teacher. Your professor has nothing to do with the support services. For the school I go to, Quinnipiac, it's the Learning Commons. I personally haven't gone, but in quite a few classes that do tests, not most, I'm a communications major, very few tests in that, but in like math or something like that, they will always say if you have a accommodation, you have to go through the Learning Commons, which I know you have to actually go take the test. The Learning Commons for me is in the library. You have to go to the library to take the test. You can't take it in the room. If you need extra time, you go to the Learning Commons. If you need this. So you kind of alienate yourself in that sense. You don't just sit in the room with everyone else. You are now you're by yourself now, or with the very, very select few people versus the whole everyone else. And I wouldn't want to do that personally. That actually is the reason I never used it in high school is I didn't want to be the only one with a laptop. I didn't want to be the only one sitting there an extra hour. I didn't want to It's very alienating and it's a label you don't want.
So you bring up a really valid point. We had a discussion this week, and it was looking up different types of student services that are available. And most of my peers took a different approach than I did. And the approach they took was, like a freshman studies class, or having more of a holistic approach, or something like the Learning Commons and having an area where people can go. I took a completely different approach, and I looked at it through the lens of one-on-one with the professor and how the
Mhm.
professor can actually aid in the support services for their students that are in need, and what professors can do to what you literally just said to provide need to students that are more adaptable and flexible and accessible when there is a student who has extenuating circumstances. Now, given that, realizing that I'm sure that the professor isn't just teaching one class and they don't just have 20 students. They probably have 100 and some odd students, and that can get a bit overwhelming. But there are ways to organize that because I am sure that not all 100 some odd students need services. Some just go to class and do their thing and go by. But for the ones that do, I took the approach of offering time and having an online setup where you can set up whether it's a virtual, which would actually work for your roommate, having virtual time where he could have this conversation in the car while he's driving, going back to his job versus having to meet at the set office hours in the room. Having, where they can look at a calendar of where there is time available and set it up that best fits their needs, that the professor has given them these times I'm available, but if you can't make it, let me know and we can work it out. And again, I know that it's a catch-22 with the availability of the professor. Some professors, this isn't their only profession. Sometimes it's their side job, and they don't have all of that. They work a 40-hour job themselves, and they could be an adjunct professor. But there are ways to do it where it can accommodate students that do have extenuating circumstances and need additional services. Your roommate may not be the typical student, but he is still a student at your university, and he still is paying hard-earned money to be there. And there should be services available to help him and guide him and be accessible. That if he is in need of an extension or whatever it might be, that there is a way for him to get it without making it so difficult that he doesn't even bother to ask. So that's a really, from your own perspective and having been there yourself and then thinking about having to do it in high school, it is not the best. And I had to do the same thing. I was in a separate room myself when I was diagnosed with a learning disability in junior year of high school. You cannot retrain. It's very, very hard. And when I went to college, my mom, your grandmother, was very, very, go to the learning center, Heidi. Make sure you get all this extra help. And you just don't want to do it. Like you
Want to do
just
it.
don't want to
Because
be
then you're
away,
that person, that you have a
and then
label.
you're that person. So it is challenging. And for folks that do have additional services on top of that, whether they are low income, whether they are first generation, who are really navigating this pretty much on their own, it is overwhelming. It is, and
Hmm.
luckily for both you and I, we did not fit that mold. However, it is very, very overwhelming, very, very overwhelming. Well, so your perspective is really on point, being living it right now and also seeing it firsthand in somebody who is going through this. So thank you, for sharing that. But I know you have a story that I know you can sum up very quickly. That is an additional student student story that is not quite as common as we might think, but maybe it is more common in other areas, but we don't see it very often here. That you have a story that requires additional services and what you have overcome in yours. So if I know we don't, we could probably talk about this forever, and I certainly could as well, but if you can summarize your story and then what services would have been helpful for you, we can kind of talk through that.
Yeah, I think that phrasing it as what would have been helpful is perfect because there is next to nothing. So, as you know, I have a beautiful 1-year-old son. And on top of that, I'm in an accelerated 3-year bachelor, 1-year master program, taking 18, 19 credits a semester, January, summer classes, everything, internships, all of that. Love that. Well, there is nothing, absolutely nothing. They don't, my professors care. The university does not. They probably don't even know. Um, so the only service, or I should say, only thing offered, actually, at least at Quinnipiac, is the housing contract. Is with a dependent, I am able to be released from it. Yay. That's it. I get nothing else. I have accommodating professors, thankfully, um, who are very, very, very accommodating. I'm very grateful for them. They don't have to be. It's not their job to be. They just are. Had they not been accommodating, it'd be a very different circumstance. I don't know if I'd have been able to get this far into college. I have 1 semester left. I might not have gone that far. With going home, with working, with taking care of my son, taking care of myself in college, getting everything done. It can be very overwhelming, and with literally no support system outside of home, that's it. There's nothing. Um, yes, professors are like they're still humans. They have lives, and it's not their fault. It's not their problem. And my professors were nice, but I know that a lot of professors might not have been. I'm very grateful to have been in the communications field because with that means that the people communicate. Um,
No pun
it's very
intended.
nice because a lot of them have very high functioning abilities with technology. So a lot of them have like Calendarly, that's one of them that they use where they
Mhm.
you can just book a slot that's open and that's like anytime. It's not like office hours. It's a one-on-one, which is very nice. But that's I've only seen that in communications. I have not seen that in any other school. And it's not school of business, not school of I mean, I do School of Nursing, but not them, not gen ed classes, nothing. Just School of Communications I've seen then, which I found very interesting. But um, funny enough, I didn't even need it for them. It was every other class I would have needed it for, um, because communications is all projects. So yeah, to sum it up though, I think there should be services that are just kind of for everyone because yeah, it would accommodate specifically students with children or dependents or extenuating circumstances, but even just my typical suite mates that are on a 4-year plan, living the 4-year college life, it's still stressful and there's still services that I feel like should be provided, and I think most college students would agree. Um, yeah, it kind of sums it up.
Have
There's
you
nothing.
have you seen anybody, today there's a lot of discussion about mental health and also students needing services for mental health issues. And I mean, the wide range of discussion around mental health is so broad that it would be hard to narrow in on any one specific area of concern. But, as an incoming freshman, I know that your sister has friends who have used mental health services before to get themselves on track. Incoming freshmen probably feel a little bit different of the overwhelmness because it's a brand new situation versus somebody, like your roommate who this is his second college. He's trying to do everything that he needs to do and whatnot, but he's got his own set of overwhelming things that could fit in that mold. But have you seen anybody or have anything that's been offered from a mental health area for student services?
Yeah, well, actually, great you say that. Do you know what Tuesday this year, November 19th? You know what day that was? The holiday, I should say. Probably not. That's Men's Mental Health Day. No one knew that, actually. The university never said it. No one. I actually found out the next day because my friend said, "Hey, remember yesterday?" Yeah, no one knew. So, as a male, I no one really cares. Like we don't really reach out to anyone. Just kind of go with the flow. I know that with my sister, it's a little different. Bit more common, I should say. Um, no problem with that, just a bit more common. I think at least for men, we don't really reach out because
Mhm.
we don't think that anyone cares. I think that's a very common theme, especially with other men I've spoken to, other peers, just no one either it's a thought that no one cares or it's a fact. It does regardless, that's how it's perceived, at least for us. And I'm not that's not for everyone. I can't speak for everyone, but at least in my experience, most people that I know would agree that it's not really spoken about men's mental health. So I don't think I could speak to that being something
Mhm.
that is really promoted.
No,
Um, I've
that's
seen a lot
fair.
of mental health emails from my college though. They do send out a lot.
Okay,
I've
that's
never
good.
actually clicked anything. I don't know how many times people click things. I'm sure that they get clicks, but yeah, I personally can't talk to that because I'm not even aware of what services they provide because
Mhm.
I don't reach out. No point. And
I
that's
do
just
think that
how I do.
there may be a difference unless it's something that is, very much on the right in front of your face that from a male female perspective, there is a bit of a difference. There is definitely, from what I have read and seen, and that there is definitely a high percentage of males in the higher education area that do need and use mental health support services. But you're right in saying that it typically sits on
Goes
the
under the
female
radar.
side for whatever reason. And like I said, unless it's like right in front of your face, you think of when you think mental health issues, you go right to the females versus the males. So, I would agree with that, and thank you for your honesty and not and no that you've seen the emails, which is good to know that they are out there,
Oh
but
yeah,
you
I
yourself
guarantee
haven't
top last 10 emails, at least one of them has to do with mental health.
mental
Quinnipiac
health.
is
Yeah,
very good about that when
yeah,
it comes to reaching out. I'm not sure what happens after you click the email, but I know that they do reach out. They do their due diligence for that.
yeah. So, just to kind of wrap things up and kind of to talk about this, there's when you think about support services, like I had mentioned at the beginning, we automatically think about academics and what approach universities can take from an academic standpoint to ensure that students have everything that they need academically, having a math resource room, having a English resource room, having even I'm sure there's a history and science and all of that. And we also took a different approach in thinking about how um, professors can also use their availability as ways to connect with students who might need their services. I think when you do think about, and you mentioned this, student services overall, the university is not necessarily going to approach you. So unless they're told, whether it's as an incoming freshman or somewhere down the road, unless the university is aware, they're not going to be aware. And this is something that sort of sits now on the student to take advantage of all of those additional services that are available to them. And you make a great point in saying, men don't think, or the males don't think that the university cares. Well, I would slightly disagree because you literally caveated that with saying you of the last 10 emails, they at least one of them said something about mental health. They do care, but if students do not feel comfortable enough to bring it up, then there's no way the university can look into it or attempt to help. So, the weight kind of shifts a little bit when there is a need for services on the student. The student's got to has to be able to be confident enough to be able to say, I need help. I'm going to go and get help. And this is how I'm going to go and get help. And that in and of itself is an enormous hurdle.
Mhm.
Enormous hurdle. Academically, I think is a lot easier. I know your sisters use the math resource because we all know that is not her strong point. So I know she has used that. I do believe you have used additional services on your own where you have
I could
reached
speak
out
to it. I have not. Do you know why? You need a doctor note. It's not like high school where I could just say I have ADHD. I have to get my doctor to approve it. And then I have to get a form filled out and then I have to bring that to, there's a lot of work and it's too much. It's too much to do. They make it difficult because probably because people abuse the system, so it ruins it for everyone else, which makes sense. But there's a
but
lot
you've
of steps
spoken to
to
your
go into,
professors one
which
on
kind of
one.
translates to the mental health thing. Is there's a lot of extra work that just seems like added stress, which is kind of like a how do I say? It's like a double-edged blade. Like you have to do this to reduce this, but it also increases this, which to reduce it's interesting to think about. You have to do more work to then do less. Because then I have to go home, go to my doctor, get a physical, get this, whatever, 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 whatever. Get him to actually sign this. Because what if he says no, and then I'm yada yada. You know what I mean? It's a big circle, and you get caught in the loop. And it's very interesting how easy and difficult it is at the same time. Because the
Mhm.
services are right there. They're right. You can just walk to the light. They're right there, but you don't have that paper.
Interesting. Interesting. That's very because
Which is
you
why I
there
never
could be
went from high
services that
school
you
with that
need.
504 to college with the 504 is I didn't have that 504 that had a doctor signature.
Interesting. So, I know you've talked to your professors one on one, but going deeper into that because services as a freshman coming in with the 504, I know we sat down and we talked to whoever it was about what you needed to do. But if something arises later on that wasn't as an incoming freshman, there's yellow tape, red tape,
Mhm.
I should say, and it's hard to break through and go through that. So if we ruled the world, Andrew, and we came up with like this super plan on on what could be done to help students, with additional services. If I were to pick one, I think I would still focus on what I focused on, in my discussion, and if available, professors, hopefully can take it upon themselves to offer additional outside the official office hour time where they can help students. I realize again that it can be difficult if you have a lecture of 300 kids. That's a bit challenging, but there are ways to do it. And if you were to come up with one additional way that you would suggest universities to offer different types of student services, what would it be?
I wouldn't call this a service, but I'm glad you asked about one extra thing. Transparency has been the absolute best thing from and everything I've seen from other students, all my peers, myself with my child. Transparency goes all the way. By
Mhm.
telling my professors that I will need extra time. I don't know on what, I don't know if with what, I don't know for how long, but I will need it. I'm having this has come up. This is what's going to happen. I'm coming to you for help, transparency. that's what helps. I can't expect them to know, and I don't expect them to know. I don't expect them to help, but I'm being transparent, and that's what they ask for. And that's what we ask of professors, to be transparent with us too. And I think that, like I said before, communication and transparency, that's the whole thing. That is the biggest service that I feel it
Mhm.
should be used, because you don't need a signature for transparency. You just need to talk. You need to send that email, or just stay the extra couple minutes after class and just
Mhm.
make it known what's going on. If you can't get this homework done, they don't know. If they see a zero, they
Mhm.
see a zero. You could be like every other kid that doesn't submit their homework. They don't know that you didn't submit because of this or because of that, or you just need a couple extra days, or you're getting it done, or you're stressed. They don't know that. Just tell them. Transparency is probably the number one thing that
Mhm.
is overlooked in college, I feel like.
Yep. And that is something that is something that needs to be learned.
Hmm.
We can teach it all we can, and we can talk about make sure you communicate, and communicate's key, and being transparent and being open and honest. But it also sits a little bit on the student to do it.
Hmm.
And
You don't want to tell
unfortunately,
your professor you need help. You don't want to ask for
right.
help.
Yep, absolutely. So it is probably going to be an ongoing thing for quite some time to get it right. And I don't know that there is really a right way because every student is different. Every need for services is different. We've talked about all different kinds of student service needs, different types of students that are coming in to college today, and every one of them was different. But having, some way of offering a service, whether it's starting with the student asking, because that really is where it's going to start, but having the availability to offer the service, whether it is academic, whether it is financial, whether it is the need for extra support because there is a dependent, whether it's working full time like your roommate, whatever it might be. There's everybody is different, and there needs the need for different offerings is super important.
Absolutely. We are 2 seconds away, so bye bye.
Well, no, it says
Oh wait, it
8:29.
went over. That's so
Yeah, we
funny.
have 8:29. But we're going to wrap up anyway, Andrew.
It
We've
says
been talking for quite
40:07 on
some
the top for
time.
me. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much again for episode two of the new post-secondary student podcast, talking about student services. As always, I appreciate your very open and honest responses and look into the world as you are a new student and I'm an old student. So thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.